Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. My name, of course, is Brian Doyle, and with me today, as always, are my lovely co-hosts, co-stars, and ambassadors on Quan. Yes, I watched Jerry Maguire recently.
Here we
Tim
go.
McNeil and Rob Rogers. How you guys doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, Brian. How are you doing today?
Fantastic, man. You know, it's summertime here in the Northeast, and we have a very special episode because everybody on this call has some tie back to Connecticut, dear old CT, where I'm still the only guy, unfortunately, residing. But,
3 out of the 4 of us were smart enough to get out.
Yeah. And then, definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over. And that's a big part of my life. But with that said, again, we want to welcome Peter Duflo from Strategic Ventures in Atlanta to join us today. Peter has got a very unique space within the MSP community, one that I'm sure some of our listeners didn't even realize really existed yet. So I'm going to let him share more about it, but welcome, Peter.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for the introduction. Listen, I tell you, Connecticut's sounding really good right now when you have a July and August in Hotlanta. I miss the cooler summertime, lower humidity weather in Connecticut that I had for so many years.
Yeah.
Yep, all of a sudden you're itching for 83 degrees, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. We broke 82 degrees today.
Yeah. I think today we're pushing 90 in high humidity.
There you go.
We're pushing 92, but the humidity's all right today.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, that's great. I mean, there's truth to that. I used to live down in sunny FLA, as did Rob, and that's a different kind of heat in the summertime.
It's a whole new world.
But I don't think anybody's here for us to prognosticate about weather. And with that being said, Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit about, how you got yourself into the MSP world and a little bit about what you're doing today with Strategic Ventures.
Sure. Well, I've been in the MSP world for quite a few years now. Earlier in my career, I, with a few different partners, we built one IT services company, and that was sold to a private equity firm. And then we built another one, and I sold that to a public company. Then after going through a couple of different exits, I felt the investment banks hadn't necessarily understood the IT services sector. So for 9 years, I did M&A advisory work in this sector, helping a lot of entrepreneurs who would build up IT services companies, helping them plan their exit strategies and then selling their companies for them. And then back in 2008, when Wall Street burned down, it looked like it was just going to be fire sale work in the IT services sector. And that didn't sound real appealing to me. And I noticed in selling a lot of these companies that after the sales, that the combined entities oftentimes had a lot of difficulty with integration. That I'm sure doesn't surprise any of the listeners. And so I thought, I could help them build out their executive teams on the combined entities to be more effective at integration and driving sales revenues and basically scaling the companies up to the next level. And so back in 2008, I moved into executive search. And again, I just handle the CXO level and the VP level. Typical retained searches I lead are, and oftentimes the private equity firm or the boards are the ones that bring me in, involve me in the process. Usually they're looking for a new CEO, COO, VP of delivery, CRO, VP of sales. And that's what keeps me busy. I'm fairly well known in the MSP industry, which is my specialty. I have a weekly newsletter for the industry that's read by over 750 CEOs of MSPs and their private equity investors. It's called the Scouting Report.
Scouting Report?
Yeah, it was okay.
Yeah. And if your listeners would like it, they can email me or go to the strategicventures.com website to sign up for the weekly distribution of the newsletter. So I work again with MSPs throughout North America. And that kind of summarizes what I do, Brian, at a high level.
So, let's talk about that a little bit because, I know a lot of MSPs, especially those that might still be in the growth phase, early stage growth phase, probably really haven't thought about a recruiter or even really thought about, the role beyond, hey, right now we need to grow, we need to get money in place, we need to get our service operations, in check and streamlined. Maybe you can share kind of the characteristic of what an MSP looks like that would want to leverage a recruiter and what you're really looking for in some of those roles. We can probably talk about, right after that as well.
Yeah, I may sound a little bit like I'm splitting hairs, but if you're in the industry, you know what I mean. I handle executive search assignments. It's on a retained basis. It's more of a consultative approach where I work with the board and the CEO. I'm not doing recruiting of salespeople or technical resources. Those are handled by specialized recruiters that do a very good job in this space. Mm-hmm. But generally, I'm brought in when a company is at least, over 5 million in revenues. And they realize that to go to the next level for whatever reason, that they need to bring in more experienced people onto the executive team. And because I'm networked with most of the larger MSPs, when I say larger, I mean, greater than 5 million in revenues in the space, I know where to reach out to help them find talent who's experienced at things like, improving service delivery, implementing standard sales processes and procedures, driving improvements in gross margin and customer retention. On the delivery side, of course, improving CSAT scores. And for the ones, the MSPs that are out actively doing corporate development, making acquisitions and tuck-ins, which most of the private equity owned MSPs today are on the hunt to make acquisitions regardless of their size. Usually the existing executive team will have some shortage in people that understand how to successfully integrate the acquisitions that they make. And so they'll come to me and say, hey, Pete, I need a CFO. Matter of fact, I have one right now who just approached me last week. Hey, Pete, we need a CFO who has experience in doing integrations. And then I just wrapped up a search for an MSP that most of your listeners would recognize their name. He said, Pete, we need a COO who can integrate a service delivery model across these half a dozen acquisitions that we've done. So that's the types of people that my clients are looking for and need.
Yeah, it's amazing some of the skill sets that as you start growing and getting to that level of 5 million, we go beyond kind of the owner-led model, and really as we start becoming a business at that stage, where those gaps really can come into play for any MSP.
Yeah, and as soon as they're acquired by a private equity firm, which is 99% of them do get acquired sooner or later by a private equity firm, as soon as that deal's closed, they find out really fast how they need to improve their financial reporting, the timeliness of it, the accuracy of it. The private equity firms are looking for data-driven, KPI-based reporting.
Yeah, sure. What is the one that you're seeing the most of right now out there that are people are coming to you for? Like what position is most sought after, after a PE acquisition?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. The funny thing is, it kind of changes. The pendulum swings year to year. Last year, they wanted CROs and VPs of sales. That's what the main request was. Not all, but we're generalizing here. And this year, it's COOs and VPs of delivery. Right now, the MSPs are having a real terrible time with employee attrition. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We all know that the demand for technical resources for MSPs, it has been off the charts. They're dealing with a lot of turnover of their technical resources. And so they're looking for CLOs and VPs of sales that can come in and tamp down the employee attrition, put plans in place to do that, as well as improve their CSAT scores. Because of the attrition, a lot of them they're having some, customer attrition that they aren't used to. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I think what's driving it this year.
So when as you're doing these searches, I mean, obviously not everything, but a lot of things have changed since COVID. Are you seeing, when you're trying to find a person for a specific role in a specific company, are you finding them from other areas? Or is there a lot of flexibility, like a lot of companies are doing these days, with being remote and just kind of going into the office once in a while, whether it's once a month or whatever that looks like? And what does that look like with the flexibility of when you do find that right candidate, knowing that they're not always going to be necessarily in that MSP's backyard?
Yeah, great question, Tim. It's funny. 5 years ago, all my clients wanted their CXO and VP level executives at the home office.
Yep.
And then about 3 years ago, it started changing, where the VPs, the road warriors, anyhow,
Yeah,
it's fine.
They're there anyways, so who cares, really?
Yeah. And now, since COVID, I'm finding clients are running their executive teams, some of them on a pure virtual basis completely. More out on the West Coast. The West Coast MSPs, you'll find more of them that are, their executive teams are virtual. On the East Coast, I'm finding, that even some of the CXO level roles, they'll allow them to be based remotely. It has changed. And over the last 5 years, it's been a big change.
Yeah.
The advent of Microsoft Teams and Zoom, I mean, they can, rather than someone coming in and plunking down on a chair across from their desk, they just do what we're doing right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Very cool.
Now, in terms of the resources themselves, are you finding that you're recruiting directly from the MSP marketplace, or are you recruiting, talent, no matter where it comes from and what industry it comes from? What's kind of the expectation of your client companies that you're serving?
Well, because I just specialized in the MSP space and have for a long time, I usually will find the candidates from the MSP space. I can't think of the last search I've done where the candidates I submitted did not come from the MSP space.
Such a unique space too. Like, even though, every company can say that they're unique little flowers, as we've heard comments in the past, the reality is the MSP space does have some unique properties that requires a different skill set in terms of leadership.
Yeah, it's its own animal in terms of, its business model and what makes an MSP successful. And as you pointed out earlier, they're usually, founded by, someone with a strong technical background, not necessarily a sales background. And that gives them a whole nuance of its own and unique challenges.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. So let's use CEO, CFO, and CRO as kind of our three examples here. And maybe you could tell us like the top three skill sets that each, in your mind's eye, one of those needs to possess to be successful. And if it's more than three, go for it. Or if you want to give a persona, that's fine. But, really just trying to get a sense of what have you seen historically make for a good CEO? What were the traits there? Good CFO, good CRO.
No, that's a great question. Actually, it might take me a minute or two to think about that.
Well, we have good editors, so we can pause.
Yeah.
I mean, a good CEO, I was talking to one at a company yesterday. Most, again, of your listeners would recognize the name. He said, I'm not a dictator here. I hire really smart executives, and I look, when we have to make a strategic move, I look for a commonality on my executive team. I want them to be bought into any key strategic decision that I make. And that is, I think that's a real good trait for a CEO. Someone who is able to bring in a good team around themselves and then listen to that team and try to make team-oriented decisions, because then you get buy-in across the organization and things get done much more effectively with less pushback. I think a good CEO has to understand the P&L and have a good sense of that. And, if you don't understand the P&L, you can drive off the road pretty quick.
Yeah.
And it's your CFO's job to make sure you understand that. But I think have a good, finger on the financial pulse of the business is very important. And then I think another attribute of a good CEO and an MSP is someone who's inherently committed to both the customers and to the employees. Let's talk about the customers first. I mean, you can have a lot of turnover of the customer base in an MSP. I mean, they all tend to have at least 5% attrition a year. Some have 10%, some may have 3%, depending on what vertical they're playing in. So, customer satisfaction scores are really important. And having a CEO that understands that, is committed to doing what's necessary to keep the customer base happy, is really key. Because the MSPs the beauty of their business model is it's a reoccurring revenue stream. Their clients sign 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year contracts where they're getting checks from their clients every month. Yeah. You set your watch at it. All they have to do is keep their clients' systems, integrated and running smoothly.
Up and running.
Yeah.
Up and running. So, that's, you don't want to shoot the golden goose, you want to keep the golden goose fed and happy. And the good CEOs understand that. Another thing is, keeping the employees happy. We just talked earlier about, the high employee attrition that MSPs are experiencing. And to keep employees happy, it has a lot of different attributes. Certainly the financial compensation is important, but what's, I think, more important is that the employees feel an integral part of the organization, feel that they're heard, whether they have good ideas or they have concerns. They feel part of, it's interesting. A lot of the millennials will say, and I have 2 sons who are software developers at companies, they want to feel like they're doing something good for society. And so some of the MSPs, literally, when they go out recruiting, they talk about how what they're doing is valuable to society from some aspect or another. Some of them, it's, they support local charities in their central, geographic footprint, and other ones are supporting healthcare research facilities that keep the systems going there. So, support keeping the systems going so the healthcare research can continue unabated is very, they feel good about that.
Yeah.
So, those are attributes of a good CEO. Is that enough on the CEO?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. Like, we are in the great resignation right now, and like, it is very tough because we do a lot of the recruiting down at the entry level and, level 2s on the sales side. And what is it on the, the upper side where you work on the, CXO side? Like, how long is it taking to like find these types of roles? Like, is it months? Is it quarters? Like, how do you measure that up there?
Yeah. What's the expectation with that?
Yeah. Well, finding the roles, the engagements, or finding the people
to fill that role. Like, you have a post, right? Or you have somebody that comes in with a rec and you need to fill it. Like, how long is that taking now compared to what it was 2 years ago?
It's really no different for me because I just specialize in this little niche.
Yeah.
I pretty much know the players, and usually I'm able to put a slate of candidates together within the first 21 days of the search, certainly within the first 30 days of the search. Now, if I didn't specialize in this space, it would probably be a different answer.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Well, then so really you can improve the traction for somebody that's looking to get that role filled and filled quickly. something that your organization would be able to do is kind of help move that with that familiarity, because we're hearing much longer hiring cycles.
Much longer. Much longer.
Much.
That's
across the board.
Yeah.
Whether sales, tech, different levels of tech. No, granted, never have been in the executive side, and it's a different beast. And if you've got that database or you've got those people already, that's a huge benefit. Huge.
Yeah, it's not a debt. Certainly it's in my database, but it's the relationships I've built over the last 14 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
When I get an executive search assignment, usually immediately springs to mind people I can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, got this great career opportunity as CEO to lead this MSP based here. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. And usually we get to the point of an offer being accepted within 8 weeks of the start of the search.
It's really, you're talking 21 days to find them, probably 30 days to vet them and interview them. And then you're really talking about maybe really a process that's 2 to 3 months max. Is that about right if I'm timelining it okay?
Yeah, usually, again, we have the offer accepted within 8 weeks of the start of the search. Then generally they give a 2 or 3 week notice to their existing employer. And so they start certainly within 3 months.
Yeah. So find your CEO superstar in 90 days, man. There's your promo.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Anything else you think might be worth sharing about that we haven't covered today? Is anything that you think our listeners might be interested in as it relates to, building an executive team or hunting for an executive team that we haven't already discussed, Peter?
Good question. I'm just thinking back to a lot of my clients these days, again, the private equity firms often, refer me to the CEO or they bring me in. We tend to work jointly between the private equity team and the CEO. They are really looking for people that have executive level experience handling integrations. I mean, you guys, I don't need to tell you how many acquisitions are being done in the MSP space, how much consolidation is going on. And there's frankly more consolidation going on than there are people who can operationally integrate these acquisitions. You have a lot of MSPs, they get the deal, private equity firm, most of the people in the private equity firm don't have operational experience running MSPs. Mm-hmm. They look at the numbers, they look at that reoccurring cash flow. They're very good at analyzing, the finances of the MSP and interviewing and vetting the executive team. But I think oftentimes they underestimate how difficult integrations are, operational integrations of their acquisitions in the MSP space. And so there's a crying demand from a lot of the MSPs for CEOs, CFOs, VPs of delivery, COOs that have experience handling successful integrations of other MSPs.
Makes sense. I mean, we just recently, in fact, earlier today, we were recording a different podcast, right? We do them in batches. I don't think we've made that known a few times. And we were talking specifically about that, about how just integrating those systems can be a mountain, right? It just can be. And there's two sides to it, finding the right company or the right fit from a cultural standpoint that do have two systems and combining them. Or there's our conversation before was more around, you found that other acquisition target and they've got a different system and they just kind of walk away. They just don't want to be, or not necessarily walk away, but not as interested, we'll say. Right?
Well, Tim, and as you know, it's not only integrating the systems, but it's integrating in a standard service delivery model, because you want it, regardless of where you're onboarding a new client, they should all be onboarded, the one standard way.
Yep.
And the same with sales. Sales, you should have a standard sales model across the organization. So, you know, if a sales guy approaches them in California and then approaches the same company, which has operations in New York, you know, it should be the same sales approach. So there's a lot of different facets to integration.
Consideration, yeah.
So,
yeah. Cool.
All right, Rob, you want to take us home?
Yeah, absolutely, fellas. You know, Peter, we really appreciate you being here today. For anyone that is looking to get in touch with Peter, we will be including his LinkedIn profile with the podcast. Also, this episode will be up on mspbusinessschool.com and anywhere that you get your podcast. Peter, Tim, Brian, any closing thoughts before we kind of break away here today?
I'd be happy to, any of the listeners that would like to, you know, speak with me about their executive search needs, I'd be happy to speak with them. I would look forward to it. As you said, my contact information will be available. And you know, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with your listeners today, guys. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay. As always, thanks. We really appreciate it, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care now.
Cheers.
Bye.